Hi, I'm John Matthews, veteran law enforcement officer, winery owner, and your host for the podcast version of True Crime and Wine. And I'm pleased that you've joined us for this unique podcast where we feature the fascinating world of serial killers while we enjoy award-winning wine. So why serial killers and wine? Well, the answer is simple. Since I'm the only winemaker in the world that's captured a serial killer. So this is real true crime and real wine. And in each episode, myself and Brandy Diamond, the popular podcast host of Texas Wine and True Crime, which you can also hear on all of your favorite podcast platforms, well, she joins me, and together we take you on a journey profiling some of the most interesting and intriguing serial killer cases from around the world, all while enjoying some of our favorite wines. I've got my favorite wine. Today it's Dolcetto. But we'll talk about that a little later. So pour yourself a glass of Killer Cabernet or Murderous Merlot and join us for the podcast version of True Crime and Wine. And as always, make sure you share this show on Facebook or your favorite social media platform with your friends and true crime lovers. All right, Brandy. So here we go. Let's kind of dive into this case of the Purgatory Killer. His real name is Jack Unterweger. I'll probably call him Jack throughout the show. And this is an Austrian serial killer, and he was born in Graz, Austria in 1950. His mother, as far as we know, was a barmaid and a waitress, but like so many serial killers, also a prostitute. His father was an American soldier and left him behind after he was born, the dad back to America. Mom went to jail for fraud while she was pregnant, but they actually released her to have Jack. The mother was then again sent to prison in 1953. So basically, mom's in prison. She gets out to have the baby. And 3 years later, she's back in prison. Jack then is sent to live with his grandfather. And his grandfather helped him, or his grandfather taught him and used him to facilitate his stealing of animals from other farms. So here you've got a young kid, mom's already in prison, and grandfather is a criminal teaching him how to be a criminal. Jack, of course, was in and out of prison his entire young life. Get this. I mean, and this is kind of crazy, even with what I've seen in my law enforcement background. He was convicted 16 times in an 8-year period for crimes including theft, sexual assault, and promoting prostitution. In layman's terms, he was a pimp. So over 8 years, he's got 16 convictions. How many arrests is that? 30, 40, 50, 60?
That's exactly what I was thinking. You don't count those, typically when people have been arrested, you don't necessarily count their arrest. It's more of their convictions that you have been on. And you have 16 of these, which is extremely high. Again, we're not even talking arrests. So what did he actually even possibly get away with? You have a kid who had a bad early life. His dad leaves. Then you have a grandfather, another man who comes into his life that could possibly help him. And then he uses him to steal. And gosh, did he even have a chance, John, really?
Yeah, that's one of these that nature and nurture, and certainly on the nurture side of it, he was dealt the short straw. But I mean, when you're talking about an 18-year-old kid that's convicted of crimes like sexual assault and promoting prostitution, this kid is on the wrong side of the criminal justice system. And when asked about how he kept his girls in line as a pimp, he just casually said, I used an iron bar. So he would beat them with an iron bar to keep them in line. Now, he was totally illiterate until he went to jail and he learned to read and write.
Which he wrote a book, right? So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, a little later on, but that's kind of a unique twist in this. When he went into the prison system, he was illiterate, and they taught him how to read and write, which later would turn into a book, which is going to be the premise for his whole life after this. But let's start in 1974, because that's the first murder conviction that we know of. He murdered Barbara Schultz, his girlfriend. He wanted to have sex with her, and when she refused, he struck her with an iron bar, right? That's how he kept his prostitutes in line, and then strangled her with her own bra. When he strangled her, he used a very specific knot. Now, this is going to be important down the road. As we know, serial killers evolve, and they find things that they enjoy doing and continue to do them. He was convicted in 1976 of her murder and 4 other assaults. So you've got the previous convictions. Now you have a murder conviction. Now you have several other assaults, and he goes to prison.
He goes to prison for life.
Yep. Life. Yeah. He's not supposed to get out.
So we're going to talk about, John, as you know, our show is unique because you do profiling of serial killers, body disposal, victim types, method of murders. What do we know about him so far? What, as you, an investigator, what is honing in on your senses with this guy?
Certainly the patterns that I'm picking up from a very early age is he uses the prostitutes, so he doesn't like the prostitutes. He beats the prostitutes. He sexually assaults them. So we're already seeing him go down that road of violence. Is it because of his mother? It could be, but certainly that is a victim pool that we're going to continue to see. He knows those are women that are lost, that are easy targets, that have very few people to speak on their behalf, and he's able to beat the system, at least for the first 8 years, over and over and over again. We also see him starting to evolve here. He's gone from assault and battery and rape to now murder. So he continues to escalate. And the thing that I found very unique was his tool. I always look at what the killers use. So I think the iron bar or steel bar was probably something close by, and he just got used to it, kind of like Rodney Alcala that we saw, the game show killer. But strangling, and if you remember, Rodney strangled his victims with their own nylon stockings. The Purgatory Killer has found that he can use their bra as a weapon against them. And not only does he strangle them, but he uses a very specific knot, a knot that he was taught by his grandfather on the farm to use on animals. So as a profiler, I find that fascinating.
So you mentioned all of the things he's doing, but now they've got him. He's sentenced to life, and the hope is that he never does this again. So what does he do in jail? Why the early release? So let's get into this rehabilitation and his reading and writing that he now can do. What's his life like in prison?
He's very clever, honestly, like many serial killers are. And he starts writing short stories, including children's stories. Now, that's what you want to have from a murderer, right? He writes poems and plays and editorial pamphlets that he distributes inside and outside of the prison. He then goes on to pen an autobiography called Purgatory, or The Trip to Prison, a report of a guilty man. This is fascinating and clever and amazing from a certain standpoint. He wrote a book about how the Austrian prison system was so good at rehabilitation that they took this wayward kid who had by that point, almost 24 convictions for misdemeanors and felonies, including, don't forget, sexual assault, rape, promoting prostitution, and murder. This illiterate kid and the great Austrian prison system turned him around. And he could read and he could write, and he could write this book that was amazing, that said how great the Austrian prison system was. What do you think happened with that?
I think that government and people in charge like to hear things like that because, as we know, people complain about prison systems quite often and how they're treated and that how rehabilitation doesn't exist and they're just left to rot. But he's actually writing something positive that is coming out of his country where he's from. He had a hard life. Now he's rehabilitated. And they were now eating out of his hands, in my opinion, John.
That you're exactly right. They bought it hook, line, and sinker. Was this guy really rehabilitated? No, and we're going to see that. But they bought it hook, line, and sinker. Government officials, socialites, high society people, actors, the entire group that you would expect. And not only did they buy it, the book became a huge hit in the celebrity community. And at one point, the Austrian government said this book needs to be in every school to show how great the Austrian rehabilitation system is. And they even made a documentary on him and the book. So these officials, socialites, and popular people bought it hook, line, and sinker. He painted himself as a victim, and his book discussed what a hard life he had, son of a prostitute, abused in prisons, and this Austrian prison system changed his entire life. These celebrities, upon seeing this, mounted a campaign to release him from prison. And you had some of Austria's most famous writers, artists, journalists, and politicians joining the movement to pardon him because he was a model for rehabilitation. The Austrian president, however, stuck to his guns and said, I'm not going to pardon him until he serves at least 15 years of his court-mandated life term. Well, it wasn't very much later, and in May of 1990, the president released him when he hit the 15-year mark. Unbelievable.
John, I think to myself, do the victims get lost in this?
Totally.
You have celebrities now coming forward. You have people of power coming forward, advocating for this guy. Yes, nobody wants to see a child being abused. He had a hard life growing up. There's a little empathy, I think, from people. I think we even see that now today. And maybe in the little Menendez brothers, right? It seems like that was kind of, getting people to encourage, their release. But you have these people and the victims get lost and thinking about what he's done in his past. It's like it doesn't even matter.
No, you're exactly right. What about the family of the young lady that he murdered? What about the girls that he raped, that he pimped, and that he beat with iron bars? Do they account for nothing because all of a sudden these celebrities are touting how great the Austrian rehabilitation system is?
He gets celebrity status. He gets released after his 15 years, John. So what is he going to do? Attend parties, mingle?
Everybody's been talking about him. He's the hot topic out there. He's the hot guy out there. And yeah, he goes to the best restaurants. Yeah, a lot of witnesses said once he was released from prison, he always had a beautiful woman, a new woman by his side. They said he was witty and charming and handsome. Where have we heard that before? Well, over and over and over again. Let's go down the list of our serial killers, right? Right? And we've heard it so many times. Witty, charming, handsome. And people assume that he was reformed just like he wrote about. Like I said, his book was brought into the Austrian schools, and even his children's stories that he wrote in prison were performed on Austrian radio. And he had his own show that he hosted on Austrian television talking about prison rehabilitation and crime. This guy is making money hand over fist on the book, on the documentary, on the movie, on the children's stories, on the plays. The book becomes a movie itself, the best-selling book. His play called Screams of Fear went on tour. He's flirting with all of these famous socialites. He's on every magazine cover and television show. I just thought this was crazy doing the research. One of the famous actresses at one of the parties was talking to a writer, and he noted when he walks in the room, the women that are at the party, their panties hit the floor. And he was literally taking these women home from these fancy parties, having sex with them, and had a different woman every night. But that was only the first part of the evening. We'll get to the second part of the evening after our break for wine. Hi, as you know, on each episode of True Crime and Wine, we feature one of our Casaro Winery brands, and it's fitting to share with everyone what I'm enjoying today, a glass of our Dolcetto. It's a wonderful, light, dry red that I made for my summertime drinkers that don't want to switch to white, but they still want to enjoy something a little bit lighter. This great red wine has a fantastic fruit-forward aroma. I mean, I encourage everyone, when we pour this in the winery, I say, wait, smell it first. It's amazing. And then a refreshing taste. Now, Dolcetto pairs well with many different types of fruit and cheese charcuterie boards. And of course, there's absolutely no better wine to enjoy when you're listening to your favorite True Crime and Wine podcast. As always, our wines are available online at CasaroWines.com. That's CASSARO, wines, plural.com. I hope you get some Dolcetto or another one of our favorite Casaro wines and enjoy it today. Salud.
Okay, John, he is now out of prison and murders begin almost immediately. Let's jump into that.
Yeah, as I said before the wine break, he was attending these celebrity parties in the evening, right? He was also hosting a radio show and television show and reporting on crimes. And literally right in front of the very people who petitioned to let him out and under the nose of the police, he started murdering. He started murdering right away. Remember, he got out in May. By September, we know that he murdered Bianca Bakova in Prague. He strangled the young mother with his hands, repeatedly stabbed her, and dumped her in a creek near the Vltava River. So he's going to parties. He's actually having sex with a lot of the socialites. And then when he goes home, he doesn't go home. He goes on the prowl. And during, get this, Brandy, and I know you've got it up in front of you, but during his first year of his release, he killed 8 women. 8 women, aged 39, 31, 35, 23, 25, 25, 32, all of them prostitutes. He would go into the city where these parties were taking place, party all evening with these socialites, and then when they would go home, he would go prowl the streets for prostitutes, and in 1 year, he killed 8 women, and he didn't do a whole lot with them. He picked them up and took them right to a rural area just outside of town. He also had sex with them. Oh, my God. And bound them and assaulted them with sticks and tree limbs. And again, his MO did not change. He strangled them with their own bras and every time used a very specific knot. He partially redressed some of them, but really left the bodies out in the open to be easily discovered. So, from a profiler standpoint, I'm looking at things like, did he try to hide the bodies? No. He wanted them found, right? He did not try to hide them. He would partially dress some, but he really wasn't concerned. He was done with them, almost like they were trash. But he kept using his same MO. He'd strangle them and use that specific knot. The only difference is he's getting a little more into the torture because he does rape them and then assault them with whatever sticks, tree limbs, branches he can find that are nearby. So again, like most killers, we do see him evolving, unfortunately.
So it looks like the age range is in between like 25 and 35 years old of his victim, all female prostitutes. Again, with the knot, some of the things aren't changing it, leaving them out to be found. You know, did they all work kind of in the same area? Was he traveling around? I'm trying to get down, like, we always talk about the area that our serial killers are settling in. Is he comfortable in this area? What do we know about that?
Yeah, so he's very comfortable in Vienna's red light district, which is not a very big area in Vienna, Austria, but it is where the prostitutes stroll and the pimps work, and the tricks pick up the girls. You know, there's these red light districts, whether they're official or not official, all around the world. And that is his hunting ground. That's where he gets the girls. And he literally he doesn't take them far. It's amazing. He just takes them to the outskirts of Vienna, and then leaves them for dead. And he's not trying to hide them. To me, this gets back to that narcissistic personality of, look at me, look what I can do. I'm partying during the evening with beautiful people at beautiful social events. I'm making a ton of money off what the government's giving me, my book sales, my documentary, my plays. So now I'm rich, I'm famous, I'm attending the best parties, I'm dating the most beautiful socialites, and I take the disguise off after I'm done, and I go back to the red light district and I rape and murder at night.
In your research, did you ever find that anybody ever saw him out? Or, I mean, if you're hanging out with people who know people who know people, right, and you're a journalist and you're interviewed about these crimes, was he thinking about that? Did he not care? What are your thoughts about that when you're kind of...
Well, it was pretty sly of him, because if he was stopped, and I think he was on a couple of occasions, by the police, what did he tell them? I'm doing a story on prostitutes. That's why I'm here. You're going to see it on the news later on. Oh, you're going to see it in another book I'm writing. My mom was a prostitute. And him being a famous guy, they bought it.
They did buy it. Oh my gosh. And I asked you, how does this guy sleep at night? I mean, imagine being able to pull the wool, like really pulling the wool on every aspect of your life.
It's brilliant. He did it in prison, right? Wrote a fake book saying he was rehabilitated, knowing he wasn't, but it got him a free pass out of prison. He then played to the people that got him out and got popular, famous. And now he's even lying to the police going, no, I'm doing a journalistic story. That's why I'm here.
Okay, so now he has a girlfriend. It looks like he is going to get a girlfriend. Again, his narcissism in the police, telling them he's doing something else, telling him he's there reporting on prostitution. You're going to read about this soon. It was almost like he was letting them know, because he was about to go commit this crime. So he knew the crime was about to happen and he was going to be able to tell the public more about it. But now he has a girlfriend, and this girlfriend is with him at parties. So what do we know about Bianca?
Well, first, I just want to comment, because this is just, like we've been saying, fascinating. He knew how to hide in plain sight, right?
Totally.
He put himself front and center in the media as a journalist, as a crime reporter. covering his own murders.
Unbelievable.
Like he was an actual reporter, and everybody bought it. To me, this is just one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen. But he went one step too far. He criticized the police. And in doing that, some of the police said, wait a second here. We don't believe this guy. You politicians and actors and actresses and socialites may believe him, but a red flag went up in law enforcement going, something is not right. But you asked about Bianca, his girlfriend. So again, this is almost unbelievable. He's partying in the evening with socialites and having sex with them. He then has a girlfriend that we assume he's having sex with in the evening. And then he's going out to the prostitutes later on. And so I think we have to kind of figure, is she an accomplice? Does she know what he's doing? Is she totally have no idea what's going on? We do know that she had worked as a stripper and the later years together to earn them some money. So we're not exactly sure what was she a lover? Was she a girlfriend? Was she a follower and a fan? And she wanted to be with the popular people, the beautiful people. And did she know what he was doing when he left her at night?
Well, and I also wonder, maybe he was telling her the same things everybody else thought. Maybe he was telling her he was reporting and investigating and doing, casework and uncovering things. I mean, it seemed to work on everyone else. So maybe why not her, especially if he's having to leave at night and she know he's gone late at night.
And it's not just her that's falling for him. I can't emphasize enough this relationship between the socialites, especially the female socialites, right? We heard that one reporter say their panties would just fall off. And we heard other journalists later say that the women found him exciting, interesting, and intriguing. He loved flirting with them. And many said afterwards they liked having sex with him because it was forbidden, dangerous, erotic, and kinky in a scary kind of way. Brandy, that's out of my ballpark and into yours. Why? What are these women thinking? I have no idea.
So I think that's a man with a little mystery is always good. I think that's and you have socialites, right? So these are women who like to be taken care of. They feel like they are in some sort of authority in their own lives, right? Whether it's their circle of friends or people who know who they are. And I think it's their status as well that attracts that this is what they want. It's mysterious. He's interesting. I mean, how many times, John, have we heard women look at these serial killers and want to be with them, write them in prison, or and fall in love with? I mean, we see it just recently. I mean, it's Mangione, right? Like there is a fascination of boyish good looks and a little mystery. So and for me as a woman, I feel like he kind of hated women. But you have these women who loved him and feel like they're loved and cared for and a little mysterious with him. So it's the yin and yang thing that's very confusing.
Yeah, no, I actually had a woman come up to me last week and tell me, well, do you think it's odd because I'm writing a serial killer in prison? And I was just like, I have no idea what to say to you, lady. But Brandy, are these women that are, let's face it, they're probably married to wealthy men, maybe wealthy men that travel, maybe wealthy men that aren't home. They probably, and I'm just guessing here, this is the 1970s. Probably they're not working, they're at home. Is this their their wild side coming out? Is this them wanting to have some excitement in their life and have an affair? But I go back to the quote from this reporter that women told them they liked having sex with him because it was forbidden, dangerous, erotic, and kinky in a scary way.
Yeah, in a scary way. So that, John, I don't know. Like, if I feel like if he was very aggressive, well, I'll use that word, or forceful, or made them feel uncomfortable, I can understand maybe doing that to one or two. But you have multiple people, multiple women who have said this, who have been with him. So he is able to make women, I'm going to use the word safe. They feel safe being with him. They feel safe that they're not going to be exposed. They feel comfortable enough to use these words about their sexuality and their sexual experience with him. So in a way, they feel very comfortable speaking that way. So I don't know. We need to get a good psychiatrist on the show, but yeah, those are some heavy words to use for sure.
Absolutely amazing. But we did have one female journalist that I found in the research that said what you said. She said, I work with this guy. Something was wrong. Something was off. And I know that deep down, he hated women. And so there were some women. So I'm wondering, is this a class difference, right? Is this a working class journalist that, she's very attuned to the streets and very attuned to her own senses, and she's not getting, washed away in all this celebrity and going, I work with this guy. He hates women, as opposed to these socialites. So we'll go on, but I just found this again with our cases. I only pick cases that are interesting and intriguing to me. And when I started seeing this, it was just I just couldn't believe it. This is a guy that's whining and dining these women, that has a girlfriend and is going out and murdering on a regular basis. We're talking 8 murders in less than a year.
Yeah, absolutely. But John, he's about to leave Austria and he's headed to LA. So
yeah, as part of
you doing in LA, John?
As part of his job as a reporter. Remember, they're revering him as a big crime reporter. So a magazine in Austria hires him to write a story on the differences between U.S. and European views of prostitution. Oh my God, you're letting the wolf in with the chickens. Again, the guy has an excuse to be with prostitutes every night. Look, here's my letter. Here's my credentials. Here's my media card. Here's my assignment. That's why I'm out here with him, and that's exactly what happens. So they paid for him to travel to L.A. Brandy, of all places in L.A., where do you think he stays?
Well, John, based on my research of serial killer and crimes, I'm going to guess, I'm going to say the Cecil Hotel is in my top 3, but it's now my top 1 after all the cases I've covered.
There you go, right? Where Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, stayed, famous for a number of crimes, been featured on documentaries and true crime stories. Yes, of all the places. And I tell you, I go back and forth to LA a lot, doing some of the television shows that we do and things like that. Never stayed there, never planned to stay there. I'll keep with my hotels. But he met with LAPD officials when he's out there, and even did a ride along in the city's red light district, interviewing police and prostitutes. So again, he is literally putting himself out there front and center and saying, hey, look at me. I'm meeting with the police. I'm doing ride-alongs. We're talking with prostitutes together. So if he's ever stopped, he's got all the alibi in the world.
What do you think this does to his thirst for what he does? This puts him like in a new playground. Are his senses, when you're profiling, do you find that the senses rise in these perpetrators when they are in a new location, fresh meat kind of thinking in their mind?
Well, and I think he's feeding off this narcissism. He's now seeing he can get away with whatever he wants in LA, in a different city, a different country, halfway around the world. So you don't think he's more empowered than ever? And guess what happens? Shannon Exley, Irene Rodriguez, and Peggy Booth all murdered during the time he was in LA, all beaten, all sexually assaulted with tree branches, all strangled with their own bras with a signature knot, and dumped in a rural area but not buried. Three victims in 3 weeks. I think that answers your question. He is emboldened.
That answers my question. 3 weeks. I mean, that is just unbelievable. And it's like he knew he was only going to be there for a certain amount of time. But yes, the senses were up for him. And my gosh, 3 victims in 3 weeks.
And the exact same MO, right?
Yeah.
He did not change his MO, even though he was in a different country, a different red light district, obviously a different type of prostitute, you would think. There's got to be some difference, but apparently not. And it just made his hunger, his thirst even more. And he killed and killed and killed. So from Austria killing once a month on average, he's now killing one a week while he's in Los Angeles. Brandy, as you know, we bring our true crime and wine events on the road. And so we're asking the listeners out there, if you know of a winery, maybe your favorite place to hang out, that you'd like to host a live, in-person true crime and wine event, then simply email us at truecrime@casarowines.com. Now, we've already made multiple road trips around Texas and all around the country, but we'd be happy to come to your hometown. So just have your winery or their manager email us at truecrime@casarowines.com, and we'll work with them to get you on the calendar and bring a real true crime and wine show to your community.
So let's talk about his downward spiral.
You know, Brandy, in this case, we have a killer who got himself released from prison saying he was rehabilitated. He's a celebrity. He's with all these socialites. And these women, knowing that he's a convicted murderer, rapist, and pimp, these rich socialites are having sex with him.
Yeah, I was thinking, John, this is Austria and this is socialites, and we're talking a very small, you have different socialites in all different areas of the world, but they all cling together. They all attend the same parties. A lot of the women see each other. A lot of the professional men probably have cigars and whiskey and talk. But my thing about this is you have these women who may know that each of them might be sleeping with this man. They might not know all the things that he's doing right now, but they know his past. Like you said, they know he's a convicted murderer. So they're feeding his ego. They're feeding this narcissism. If I'm thinking in his, and I always say, my police officer friends, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, never try to put your mind in the mind of a sociopath. You'll never really understand. But I guess I'm thinking, why, if I'm him, why stop? You're able to fool people. You're able to have relationships and sexual encounters with socialites who are pulling the wool probably over their husband's eyes. You have built this trust and you're getting away with murder, John.
Absolutely amazing. And these women are doing it willingly, knowingly, and they're having sex because it excites them in a scary way.
From just a profiling perspective, why is he doing this? What is he getting out of this, and what are you honing in on at this point?
Well, we've actually seen this with a number of serial killers. BTK comes to mind more than anybody, where these killers are getting away with it, and the police have no leads. They're not being questioned. They're not being arrested. Nobody knows. They're getting away with it, and this is just another way to taunt not only the victims, but the police, almost like, you're too stupid. I'm killing all of these women in Austria and in the United States, and you have no leads. And so they start getting more brazen, more bold. And here we have him calling the husband of one of his victims. And he said, I was her executioner, and she got what she deserved. And a few months later, the same victim went to his mailbox, and in it, he found her cigarettes and a passport picture of her son that she always carried on her. So he knew it was the real killer. It was not some random call. It was the real killer. And the police at this point called Jack in for questioning, but he never confessed. They had no evidence, and they had to release him. But again, this kind of started his downfall a little bit, because then he started writing articles that were critical of the police and critical of their investigation, and said they're targeting him because he was a rehabilitated man who became a celebrity. Well, this got the ire up of the police, and they're saying something is wrong with this. There's something we're not seeing. Let's go back and start testing everything we can test. Let's look at each murder. Let's look at each crime scene. And one assistant chief in particular kind of took the case under his wing and went back and found Jack's rental car that had already been taken to a pound and destroyed, but he retrieved it and found Jack's DNA along with DNA from Blanca, the girl that he killed in Prague.
What? They were able to still pull DNA in the form of vehicle that he used, and there was still DNA. Well, that's amazing, because cars get cleaned, but that's amazing that the DNA was found. But John, I want to go back to the phone call. Can we just go back there for a second? And the cigarettes and the phone call. Is this somebody that wants to be caught?
No, I hear that all the time. These guys do not want to be caught. They are so into themselves and what they're doing, they think they can't be caught. No matter what they remember, his pattern is leaving these bodies out in areas for people to find. He's not concealing him. He's not covering him up. He's basically saying, I'm done with you. I've used you, and I have no need for you. So this is not a killer that is trying to get away with it, like, nobody look at me, nobody see me. He's doing this in the spotlight. And I think that's just another way to shine the spotlight on him, going, you guys got no leads. Let me give you something, but I know that I'm still smarter. And in fact, they did call him in and question him, and they released him.
You would think that what he was doing, being in the public eye, being, like you said, right in the front of these cases, that he's covering the murders that he's committing, and it's not enough. It's not enough satisfaction for his ego and narcissism. So I totally see what you're saying about, I'm just going to keep pushing the envelope, and I don't think I'm ever going to be caught. I'm just doing, things that make you think I'm going to be caught, but I know I'm so good. I'm just going to push the envelope a little bit and continue to do what I'm doing. And I get brought in from police, and they let me go.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And the police are now really irked, right? They're really upset. He's going on television now going, they don't know how to do their job. They don't know the investigation. They're picking on me. Look, they're calling me in. So the police go, all right, we've had enough of this dude. We're placing him under surveillance. But they didn't discover anything except they saw him with these socialites every night out partying and all that. They did notice, though, one of them noticed that during the 3 weeks he was in LA, there were no Austrian murders.
Yes.
The investigator, who, like I said, he was kind of leading this up, called LA and said, do y'all have any murders? Oh. And LA said, oh my God. And it didn't take long for them putting it together. The investigator also discovered that when he was in a couple different cities like Prague and Graz, matched when some of the bodies were discovered. So now all of a sudden they started tracking his movements, found out when he was in different Austrian cities, different bodies were turning up, and tied him back to LA.
Well, I like the fact that this is the beginning of the end for him. I like the fact that they really jumped on this to see if there were victims in LA. I'm glad the police didn't look at him and his status and the people he was associating with and sort of disregard this any longer. So I'm glad now that they've really started to tie this together.
Yeah, and once they kind of put the pieces together,
Right.
not only of him traveling and the bodies turning up, because that was pretty obvious, but it started with that. Wait, when he was in LA on assignment, nobody got murdered with a strangled bra in a specific knot. And in LA, there were not one but three murders of prostitutes with their bra in a specific knot. So that kind of cinched it. They went back to, that vehicle I told you about. They got DNA from there. They also recovered a single hair, but for the Austrian courts, that was enough to get a search warrant for his home. They kicked the door and they discovered numerous weapons. He's a convicted felon. He's not allowed to have those. They issue a warrant for his arrest, but him and his girlfriend now flee the country. And guess where they go? Well, they travel to Switzerland and France, and they finally figure out Europe's probably not the best place for us. And they go back to the U.S. But their passports were tagged by the U.S. Marshal Service, and they were discovered in Miami. So since there wasn't really enough for an Interpol warrant to bring him back to Europe, a quick-talking marshal basically told him, all right, we're going to keep you here in America, and you are going to face the death penalty. He had no idea, right? He had no idea. He's simply saying, okay, fine, we don't have an Interpol warrant. We can't send you back to Europe, but we'll keep you here, take you to LA, and we're going to charge you with murder, and we'll give you the death penalty if you're convicted. He didn't want that, so he actually waived his rights, and they were able to extradite him back to Austria. It was a total BS line on the part of U.S. law enforcement, but it worked perfectly.
Wow. Well, and it's like, did you forget you came to the US and murdered people? Like, you thought you were fleeing and you're coming to a country where you've killed people. So, good. He's extradited back. All right. So what do we have now? He's extradited. Is there a trial? Does he have an attorney? What does his life look like when he gets back?
And again, we've talked about this several times throughout the show, but there is this thread that keeps coming up that we keep pulling on about these women being fascinated with him. So he gets back to Austria. He's in jail. He's awaiting trial. He gets an attorney. The attorney falls in love with him. And he left her all his diaries and letters and literary works. She defended him, right?
Okay.
But he told her, I'm never spending another day in jail. They're never going to convict me. She didn't believe him, but she said, I'm in love with you, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep you out of jail. Well, she was in love with him, and there was a bunch of evidence that they had. He had no alibis for the times of the murder. Right? His car was seen around several murders. They had the DNA evidence, so his attorney didn't have a whole lot to work with. They even brought in an FBI criminal profiler who testified from the crime scene since he was never there. And he said he painted a picture for the jurors that Jack Unterweger, did commit all of these crimes. That his victim profiling was prostitutes, runaways. His crime scene profiling was always wooded areas close to town, body disposed, and the unique garret on the bra, the time that he used to kill the victims. And for offender profiling, he said, listen, you've already got a convicted murderer who's using the same MO over and over again, who's narcissistic, and all of these murders are linked. Anybody can see it. Well, the jury did see it. And a 6-2 verdict even though they had very little physical evidence. One single piece of hair found in a rent-a-car that was months old, but still, they don't need a unanimous decision. So 6-2, they convicted him. Well, if he had gone to trial here in America, now they were different murders, and I'm not sure what LA would have had, but if it was 6-2,
yeah,
he would have got off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he decided to go back to Austria and was convicted in their legal system and once again sentenced to life. But what he told his attorney and his lover was exactly true, because the night of his conviction, he hanged himself in his cell using a cord from his sweatpants waistband, and in an ironic twist, he used the exact same knot that he learned from his grandfather on the farm all those years before, and the exact same knot he used to kill each and every one of his victims.
Okay, John. So we know that he hangs himself in his cell using the piece of cord, like you mentioned. But then I just found it so crazy what his official record has of the murder convictions. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So in Austria, when you're convicted of murder, you automatically are granted an appeal. Because he killed himself before the appeal could be heard, none of those convictions show up on an official record. Also, he was never extradited back to the U.S. to face the 3 murders in L.A. So actually, on his official criminal record, the only crime he has was the crime that he committed as a young man that he received his first life sentence for. He has 1 murder conviction instead of at least 11 that we know of, and it could be, as you know, many, many more. Now, as we put a cork in this edition of the True Crime and Wine podcast, I want to remind listeners that you can follow us on all of our socials at JJ True Crime and Wine. And you can sign up for our True Crime Wine Club. Yes, a wine club only with our True Crime branded bottles and for our True Crime listeners at CasaroWines.com. Simply go to the website and go to the True Crime and Wine page. You can sign up right there. And I forgot to bring it last time. I've got it this time. The new True Crime Profiler's Notebook. It's just out. You'll also find that on the website at Shop True Crime or at Casaro Wine so that you can profile along with Brandy and me. And I think that wraps up the business portion today. So I want to make sure I thank, of course, my co-host, Brandy Diamond, for joining me on this journey, and our producer, Lauren Bedsole, back in the Corsicana Command Center, for helping to make this show possible. And we'll see you on the next episode when we present The Highway Strangler, a serial killer who was so controlling he was able to talk multiple people into assisting him with rape, torture, and murder before casually dumping his victims alongside busy highways. I'm John Matthews, and thanks for joining us today at True Crime and Wine. Salute.